Berlin, February 1933. A German family sits around their radio after dinner. The broadcast begins. A communist plot has been uncovered. Economic collapse is hours away. The announcer's voice tightens. Cortisol floods the room. Then a shift. The party has acted. The threat is contained. A different voice now. Slower, warmer, the father exhales. His wife reaches for his hand. They feel it physically, warmth spreading through the chest. What they don't know is this. Both voices were written by the same man. The threat and the relief. The poison and the antidote. Engineered, sequenced, deliberate. By the end of this, you will feel that warmth. And you will know exactly what it means when you do. By 1933, Hitler held the chancellorship legally. History records that appointment, then jumps to the war. What it skips is the infrastructure built inside 60 million German minds before that moment ever arrived. That infrastructure was not Hitler's creation. It belonged to a club-footed doctor's son from Reut, who understood something Hitler never fully grasped, that power isn't taken from people. It's offered to them as relief. Joseph Goebbels didn't control Germany through fear alone. He controlled it through the neurological relationship between fear and the end of fear. That relationship is what this video is about. Hamburg, March 1933. 8 p.m. Across Germany, radios crackle to life simultaneously. The timing is not coincidental. Goebbels has studied the schedule deliberately. After dinner, the human prefrontal cortex, the seat of critical analysis, operates at significantly reduced capacity. Hans-Jürgen Eysenk's later research into arousal and cognition would confirm what Goebbels had intuited empirically. The post-dinner brain is not a skeptical brain. The broadcast begins with threat. Communists, saboteurs, economic collapse. The language is visceral. Specific, the body responds before the mind can intervene. Cortisol released, heart rate elevated, muscles primed. Then the voice changes. This is called the fear relief conditioning cycle, a sequence documented extensively by psychologist Martin Seligman in his foundational work on learned helplessness. When an organism experiences repeated cycles of threat followed by relief, and when the source of relief is always the same entity, it neurologically bonds to that entity as a safety anchor. Goebbels engineered this deliberately. His diary entry from October 16, 1933, records the phrase, "The listener must feel the threat as real before the party can be felt as salvation." The broadcast structure was pharmaceutical. Cortisol spike, oxytocin release, repeat, nightly for years. Modern neuroscience would later call this process fear conditioning through predictive relief, the same mechanism structurally present in how cable news networks frame the 6 p.m. broadcast: escalating threat, partisan resolution, emotional exhale. The architecture hasn't changed, only the frequency. Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment, Berlin, September 1935. A directive goes out to every newspaper editor, every radio producer, every filmmaker in Germany. Certain words are to appear in every broadcast, every article, every caption. Not because they carry information, but because they must be heard until they stop carrying information. Jude, Bolshevik, Volksgemeinschaft Reich. This is semantic satiation, a documented cognitive phenomenon first formally described by psychologist Leon Jakobowitz James in 1962, though the mechanism itself had been observed in propaganda contexts decades earlier. When a word is repeated past a critical threshold, the brain's semantic processing decouples from the word's rational meaning. The word becomes pure trigger, pure emotional signal, stripped of content, impossible to analyze, only possible to feel. Goebbels referenced this mechanism explicitly. His private diary, entry of March 4, 1934, records, "Repetition is not redundancy. Repetition is surgery. It removes the part of the word that thinks." The word Jew, broadcast 400 times a week, didn't inform German citizens. It altered their neurological response to the sound itself. By 1938, Studies conducted by the Reich's own sociological departments, later recovered by Allied forces, showed that test subjects exhibited measurable stress responses to the word alone, absent any surrounding context. The word had become a reflex. You encounter semantic satiation every election cycle. When a political term crisis, threat, freedom, enemy repeats across every platform simultaneously, it stops meaning something. It starts doing something. The mechanism is identical. Nuremberg, September 1934. 600,000 people stand in perfect geometric formation as searchlights cut vertical columns into the night sky. Albert Speer designed the light. Leni Riefenstahl filmed it. But neither of them wrote the psychological blueprint underneath the spectacle. Goebbels did. The Cathedral of Light was not aesthetic. It was functional. It was the deliberate activation of what social psychologist Henri Tajfel identified in his 1979 social identity theory as the minimal group paradigm, the documented finding that humans require almost no objective criteria to form intense in-group loyalty. A shared symbol, a shared enemy, a shared ritual. Enough. Goebbels understood that belonging doesn't feel like belonging. It feels like relief. The brain's tribal threat response housed in the amygdala, documented extensively by neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux, processes exclusion as physical danger. Ostracism activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Goebbels didn't manufacture hatred first. He manufactured belonging first. The hatred was a structural byproduct, the necessary shadow that made the light feel warm. His propaganda never said hate them. It said, we are safe. We are chosen. We are together. The exclusion was implied. And implied exclusion lands deeper than stated exclusion because the brain constructs it internally, making the listener complicit in their own conditioning. Goebbels' 1934 ministerial notes explicitly reference the manufactured community as the primary psychological product. The enemy is merely its definition. Social media platforms today employ behavioral researchers to optimize the same mechanism. The feed doesn't show you enemies. It shows you your tribe, your signal, your belonging. The outrage is a byproduct. The architecture underneath it is identical to what stood in Nuremberg in 1934. 3 mechanisms. 1 ministry. 12 years. The fear relief cycle created neurological dependency on a political entity as a source of safety. Semantic satiation removed the brain's capacity to critically examine the language used to describe reality. Tribal identity manufacturing made exclusion feel like protection and made the viewer an author of their own conditioning. None of this required 1933. It requires a population under economic stress, a medium that enters the home at the moment of lowest cognitive resistance, and a producer who understands the sequence. The question isn't whether these mechanisms are currently operational. The question is, the last time you felt that warmth, that chest-level relief, when your side named the threat and claimed the solution, who wrote both parts of that broadcast. The next time a news cycle delivers you a threat and its resolution within the same hour, notice the sequence. Not the content. The sequence. The fear relief architecture Goebbels refined didn't end with the Reich. It was studied, formalized, and absorbed into the infrastructure of modern influence. Next, how Stalin's psychological apparatus operated on an entirely different mechanism, targeting a different cognitive vulnerability entirely. That one produces a different kind of warmth.